Welcome to the Future Generations podcast, providing you with the world-changing content necessary to inspire you, your family, and our planet to a life of optimal health potential. We'll help you make the choices that powerfully influence the lives you bring into this world. It's time to strengthen our resolve to do better now and for our future generations with your host, Dr. Stanton Hom.
Okay, welcome to another episode of the Future Generations podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Stanton Hom, and I have with me somebody who's been on this platform to some degree as we were ramping up for Heart of Freedom 3 back in December 2021. I got the huge honor to interview Sheryl Ruettgers, who's with us today. She's one of, in my opinion, I have heard story after story for over a decade of how shots have just had this remarkable ability to harm people. And at the end of the day, Sheryl was one of the amazing people that I got to meet that just really rehumanized this entire process for me. You didn't have a platform. They were deplatforming you anyways. You had a private account only for your family. And then when you talk to you, you're like, wow, you're extraordinarily sweet and just so level-headed and grounded. And you were just doing the best you could to do the right thing on the path to your, I can't wait to talk about this blossoming new practice that you have. And I think it's a remarkable thing. But many of you may remember Sheryl from our stage at Heart of Freedom 3. You may remember her short interview in leading up to Heart of Freedom 3. But Sheryl, regardless, I would love for you to introduce yourself so that so our audience gets to know you both personally and now like very professionally to some degree.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And it's really fun to see you again. Yeah, I mean, I can just share my story, you sort of gave me a great intro in that, at the time, well, I can tell you, I live in Oregon and I'm married to a great guy. We've been married 36 years. We have 2 adult kids and 3 grandchildren. And we all live in Oregon within 30 minutes of each other. So that is really a special thing. Yeah. Just that we get to have so much impact, on our grandkids' lives. So at the time of the pandemic, I was in school to get my degree, my master's in clinical mental health. And through that process, I had an internship at a residential group home for female girls it was a step down from prison. So it was a pretty tough crowd, but I loved it. And while I wasn't forced to get the vaccine to stay in my program, I was strongly encouraged. And so this was in January of 2021 I would be considered in phase 1 of the vaccine in Oregon. And so there was very little information that was, that you were able to research about these vaccines. And so I checked with my physician. I checked with, some other people that were in the medical community that I had access to, and they all told me to take the vaccine. And I did. And so I had 1 shot of Moderna. Within 24 hours, all my lymph nodes swelled up, from my neck down to my collarbone. It's really bad sore throat. And then 2 days after that, I woke up in the middle of the night with stroke-like symptoms. My entire left side went numb and thought maybe I slept wrong. Anyway, by the end of the day, that next day, I went to urgent care, and then it happened again that same night. It got worse. And so I went to the ER, and immediately the ER physician who treated me said, "You're the 3rd person we've seen. And one of them is a physician with Bell's palsy." And so that started a cascade of health issues, that I'm still struggling with today, better in some ways and sort of plateaued in others.
It's maybe tell me a little bit about what you were telling me before we hit record. Tell me about your team, who you've been collaborating with, who's been helping with your health journey, some of the protocols that they have you on, and we'll go from there too.
So through all of this, Western medicine was not very helpful for me. The first neurologist that I saw actually told me that there was no way that this could be a vaccine reaction, and told me to get the second shot, and that she wanted to see what would happen to my body after that, which is still just like
Isn't that crazy?
mind blowing to me. Yeah. It's just mind blowing. And so I chose to see a naturopath who was incredibly helpful. He ran a lot of tests. He was not happy with just being settled with this is a vaccine injury, because he said there's probably something else going on that has also been triggered, reactivated. And through that journey, I found out that I'd been exposed to Lyme disease, which I'd never known before, never had any symptoms until my immune system was just shot. And then I saw a different naturopath for that. And then somebody tested me for mold, and I have really high mold levels. And so there's a specialist from California who's treating me for mold toxicity. Is it mold toxicity? I guess. And so I have 3 naturopaths that I'm working with. They all have their specialty. They all communicate with each other. And I have a neurologist who I really appreciate, and he is very supportive of the naturopaths that I'm working with. So I feel like I found my medical team to kind of help me through.
It's invariable in some form or fashion. And this isn't just with the COVID shot. This is with the entire industry of shots, that when something like this happens, I'm so sorry that it did, Sheryl, by the way, because you weren't quote forced, but this entire psychological operation waged on very, very, very well-intended human beings was the outcome that you had was a part of that operation, unfortunately, you know, and they had varying levels, right? Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to resist tyranny this morning, right? Like in modern, you know, free world, right? Now we are probably,
Right.
but we weren't thinking about that previously. And they knew that. And so there were varying levels of ways that, you know, I'm looking through your husband's website. You very nonchalantly said your very kind man husband, who's also a world famous Hall of Famer NFL football player. But I'm looking through his podcast. I'm looking at who he's interviewed, and I'm looking at like NBA reps, and John Stockton is a partner with him. And I'm an old guy in the NBA too. Like, I'm not an old guy, but I'm an old guy in the NBA. John Stockton and I may never interview because I'm a Lakers fan, but you know, it's okay.
But he's a really good man.
But there's so many people that are speaking to this that I didn't even know were speaking to it. And that's because of who you guys are as a family. One, great people, but also like you have this platform that is massive. I would like to, like, what I was getting at was that there is a varying level of gaslighting, and not just, sometimes it's just kind of brushing you aside, and then sometimes it's a full on get the second one and let's see. And you're like what? And how many people would actually just listen to that? Because we're kind of taught that our doctors have our best interests in mind, and they're really, really smart, and obviously they're well studied, and they're looking at everything, you know, and in the end, most people would just go get the next one, and who knows what that outcome would have been. And so I just from an entire healthcare system, I just wanted to say I'm sorry that was your experience, because it actually just takes anyone to take a step back and just be like, hey, tell me more, you know, tell me more about what your experience is. And I'd almost like to go back to when you were having these symptoms. Like, what did Ken say?
Oh, my husband was horrified. And I was the first one in my family, actually. If there was a blessing in all of this, no one else in my family got the shot because of what happened to me. And I mean, you kind of hit on it. We're just regular people going about our day trying to do whatever and listening to the media. I'll tell you, this vaccine injury changed. I mean, it changed what we talk about at home.
Yeah.
It has changed the course of how we view politics, our world, our politicians, the media. I mean, we question everything now. And so, yeah, you mentioned Ken started this podcast with John Stockton. And we've become sort of activists in a world that we just actually really just didn't think. If you would have asked me this 4 years ago, I would have laughed.
Right.
And yeah, it has changed. You asked me a question. I'm not sure if I missed it.
What was Ken's? You said Ken was horrified, but I'm curious what it was. Was it just because the reason why I ask is we sometimes, and I know this isn't the case with your family, but sometimes we hear about gaslighting within the own family. Where the domino fell. Unfortunately, you were the canary in the coal mine. That we're alerting your entire family tree virtually of everything that was going on, and everyone was like, wow, like maybe we shouldn't get this thing, right? Maybe this is something so significant we should pay attention to. Whereas some people have been completely like demonized within their own family. And it's pretty remarkable to see that's, I believe, also part of that big psychological operation. I'm very grateful that you guys didn't have that experience.
Yes, no, Ken has been supportive, from the very beginning. Concerned.
Yeah.
And I mean, Ken's a sociologist. And so this, the whole process of, the vaccines and the manipulation that went behind it to get people to get vaccinated, and then calling people, you were dirty if you didn't get vaccinated, and just all of the, like you said, the gaslighting that went with the injuries. And he stood back and he watched all of this. And, you and I think we talked about this earlier, but, because there was no research to be found, what I started doing was I would look for articles and I'd go straight to the comment section. And there was, ironically, an article written in Neurology Today quoting Fauci, talking about that there was no way that there could be neurological reactions to these vaccines. And in the comment section was a physician by the name of Denise Hertz, who retired gastroenterologist, who said, that's not true. I'm suffering from neurological reactions from my vaccine. And wow. Her email was on there. So I contacted her, as did many others. And we started this group. It started out as just an email group. It got too many. Then a small little private Facebook group that has grown over the course of the last couple of years into thousands of people in these different vaccine injury groups. But we couldn't get anybody to listen to us. And I think finally Ken was just so frustrated by what he saw with the gaslighting. I lost my, my little meager Instagram account because it just had pictures of my grandkids on there, and it was private. And I one day wrote something in there about my vaccine injury, and the next day it was completely wiped out. I had people in my private life, not my family, but other people telling me that I should stop talking about my vaccine injury because it would cause vaccine hesitancy in the larger community, because of our we live in a small town. A lot of people, see football as a impact in society, whatever. But I think he was so frustrated by that he just started making phone calls, and that's when he called Ron Johnson from Wisconsin, which is where, Ken used to play for the Green Bay Packers. And that started a whole other side thing to this that just.
I mean, many of the people who will listen to this podcast invariably have seen much of what Senator Ron Johnson has shared over the last 3 years, or I guess maybe the last two. Because would you say that you were one of the main catalysts to his involvement in making more aware of everything that has been going on from all the different levels: government, public health, science, medical coercion, vaccine injury?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, I think this is true because Ken tried to contact our state representatives in Oregon, which, Oregon's
I was going to
incredibly
ask you that
liberal.
next. Yeah.
Never a callback.
Wow.
And we both tried multiple times. And so Ron Johnson took Ken seriously. Ken had talked to one of Ron's staffers. Within 3 hours, Ron personally called him back.
Wow.
And then 2 days later, Ron asked to set up a Zoom call with Dr. McCullough and we probably had, I don't know, maybe 60 vaccine injured on this phone call, on this Zoom call, because he wanted to hear directly from the people that were experiencing these vaccine injuries. And so and then Ron, gave several of us an opportunity to participate in a press conference in Wisconsin. Whoa, 2 years ago, years ago this month.
Wow.
And that went absolutely nowhere. They attacked Ron. There was very little curiosity about any of the vaccine injured.
And that one had some press coverage, or there was some footage from that press conference, right?
It's floating around.
Yeah, I would say that it didn't go anywhere from an official governmental perspective, but it did go everywhere because so many of us had captured some. I think it was on Highwire. I believe it was on Dell's. I think it was highlighted on Dell's show.
They've since done several of them.
Yeah. Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah. So
I think I just wanted to commend you first, because I believe that there are a lot of people who've been harmed who listened to the people who said, stop saying anything, right? Stop saying anything because you're going to cause blah, 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 whatever that outcome is, vaccine hesitancy. Like, you might cause hesitancy to the thing that injured you. Like,
exactly. Imagine that.
It's like weird. Like, wow. It's like, I imagine it in any other frame, insert any other drug, insert any other anything whatsoever. I was harmed by this. I was injured by this. I didn't expect to. I was unsuspecting. I'm gonna tell someone about this, and like the onslaught of opposition that comes from people that are in your community is absolutely mind blowing. And for you to take those steps further, and to still essentially be here, which I can't wait to talk about your practice, because I think that's one of the bigger themes that I hope to elicit out of chatting with you, is because, in the end, it's like, what were they trying to do? They, right? The ethereal, voluminous they that is attacking virtually all of humanity over the last 3 years, maybe longer. What were they actually trying to do, and how they haven't stopped you to that degree? But before we go there, I love that. I love that story about Senator Ron Johnson, because I've loved his input. I've loved his objective. Let's just gather all the information and let's actually just talk to the people. Let's actually hear their actual stories, because what's actually happening is you share one thing on one platform on a private account with a bunch of pictures with your grandkids, and you get pulled, right? And so what does that tell you? That tells you that it's not even just that they're watching you, it's that they're surveilling you to a point where you're actually not suitable to remain on this platform, because you might share one comment about your story at all, and then it starts to reveal, like, the deepest and maybe most nefarious part of this is that they just want 100% compliance. They want that full stop. And I believe that they failed miserably at that. But I also believe that they, for all intents and purposes, they're kind of just getting started to some degree. And so,
Mm-hmm.
tell
My
me,
husband.
tell me a little bit about, of all the things that you've shared so far, what you could maybe verbalize as one of the biggest challenges humanity faces today.
I think people not speaking up.
Wow. Yeah.
I think, from the very beginning. So one of the very, I promise I will bring this full circle.
It's okay. Please do.
Go left field, but one of the very first things that with my injury, that my neurological injury, was that I have bilateral facial paresthesia, which my face, it feels numb, almost like I just came out of a dentist chair. And it moves around my face. And it was one of the, other than the left side, it was one of the very first symptoms that I had. And that has never really gone away. It has varying degrees of, what's the word I want? Irritation. I don't know.
Yeah. Severity, consistency.
Right.
Yeah.
Severity.
Mm-hmm.
And so Ken would say, when he couldn't get somebody to listen to him about what was going on with these vaccine injuries, his response to him was, or to people would be, it's easy for you to dismiss this because it's not your face. And we can apply that to so many different things. You watch something on the news, it doesn't directly affect you. And so it's easy to dismiss it. And yet, in this global, which is one of the things I love that you have focused on. I mean, this is global. It is bigger than just, our little areas that we impact. And so when you look at the bigger picture, it's not your face, but it's somebody else's face. And we're part of a bigger humanity picture. And so the more that we're willing to speak up, even though it doesn't directly affect us, when we see something that's wrong, it doesn't seem right, we see others being harmed or hurt, to be cavalier about that or to disregard it, it just, because it doesn't directly affect us, I don't know, it just seems to me that those contribute to our freedoms that are just slowly being eroded.
I think it's the intent of the tech companies largely. They essentially create our feeds. They check what we click on. They look at what we scroll at. They look at what we stop at. They look at for how long we stop at, whatever that is, and then they calculate how to create the world, right, to keep us scrolling. And what happens with that is that we get so fixated on whatever it is that's creating that dopamine rush that creates more addiction, is that our attention span just starts to deteriorate, right? And when our attention span deteriorates, we don't feel it in the moment, but we start to dehumanize, we start to desensitize, and we start to really, really lose our humanity. And when somebody like you not only pops up onto a screen, but then you meet them, and like when I met you in person, it almost like takes you back to like, oh wait, this is actually how life is supposed to be, right? It's supposed to be just heart to heart. We're supposed to just have a human connection, and we're supposed to hear and see and value others in a way that helps. That's just what life is, and they're so crafty at robbing us of that, and so I think on one end, even when we do speak out, oftentimes it's, when Bobby Kennedy announced his presidential candidacy, it's like you saw immediately the negative press, right? The headlines: anti-vaxxer activist, blah blah blah. Actually, after his event here, he actually had some pretty good press, which is really interesting. They covered some of the things that I thought were really core points about him, which maybe that's what we have special in San Diego. I'm not sure how we attracted who we did to actually cover our event, but that's not common today anymore, right? But it's not possible if you don't talk first, right? You don't give people the opportunity to have that domino effect that you've had in your life without actually just saying something to begin with. So I can't imagine what it's like for people who have been harmed by this thing or who have ever been harmed, right? Like it sometimes takes mothers, mostly mothers, years to get to my office, where then we get to sit knee to knee, where now they're just like, oh, I didn't want to share all of this with you because of how I put so much information out there. And I'm a little bit more radical and I'm pretty black and white in the way that I see things. But I also just tell them, like, I have no attachment to your choice. And I have full interest in your story and your child's story because I'm just here to serve you. But I'm starting to realize that from a healthcare perspective, from a governmental perspective, from a public health perspective, from our neighbors' perspective, we don't have that level of community and rapport as maybe we once did, right? Because you're from a small town in Oregon, and maybe 5 years ago, it wasn't like this,
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. I mean, it is interesting in that, because we were so vocal, and then, like the little town that we live in, there's a little local newspaper. And by golly, if they didn't have the courage to write an article about my vaccine injury, I don't know if it was because it was newsworthy because my husband used to play football. I have no idea. But what's interesting to me is because of that little article, I had a lot of people contact me saying, not anybody in my family, but I know somebody who knows somebody whose, daughter had a spontaneous miscarriage, or so-and-so's wife now had a stroke after she had her vaccine. And so I started getting all these people contacting us. And then the guy who wrote the article recently told my husband, I mean, this is like what, year and a half later, that he took huge flack from that article. Because it went against the narrative. And when you go against the narrative, you're going to take a shot and you're going to take hits. But we just got to the point where we didn't even care. I just really don't care what you think about me because I'm going to tell you my experience. Yeah. And so I think that's what made it so hard, is being canceled. Telling your own story is disturbing to me.
It's absolutely like mind-blowing for it to just be so front and center, because I think it just happens, right? There's been years and years and years of memes that essentially say, like, when you're on social media and everybody gets super tough and they start barking at each other, and it's like they have the picture of the dogs that, like, they're barking at each other between the gate, and you open the gate and they stop and they walk away because they're protected by the gate, right? In real humanity, a lot of times we're unwilling to speak that authentic truth, especially when it's your story, especially when it could serve a greater population as much as it has for you guys. It's really, in my opinion, one of the greatest, they call it like the greatest, like, way to fight against the system today is essentially, speaking up at this point. And so I really appreciate you sharing that story, because how many in your small hometown? What's the population?
God. Probably less than 10,000.
Gotcha. Yeah. So a small kind of rural town in Oregon, essentially.
Up in the mountains.
That's awesome.
No, you don't want to move here.
No, I wasn't going to say that. I feel great where I am right now.
Yes.
But so tell me a little bit more about your journey of healing, and I'm grateful that you found people that are willing to, because the injury oftentimes is the surface level thing that's deeply penetrating to your physiology and your health. But there's often competing complexities, whether it's mold or Lyme, or, from a chiropractic perspective, a nervous system imbalance or something like that. It's a really interesting avenue in healthcare at this stage, because what we're seeing is this enlivening of how we're actually going to serve this new, essentially, version of humanity, right? Because it's a level of toxicity, it's a level of neurological harm, it's all sorts of different complexities. I'd love to know a little bit more about what your journey has been like.
So I completely completely, I mean, the first neurologist or not the neurologist, the naturopath that I saw kind of came from a perspective of, your mind, body, spirit. And so we're not going to just look at one aspect of your life. We're going to see you holistically. And I tend to be a positive person anyway. And so in a lot of ways, I believe that has served my healing in some really positive ways. Yeah, big time. And so, I completely overhauled my diet and went on an anti-inflammatory diet, cut out dairy, gluten, no alcohol, no sugar. When I eat those things, I feel it. I started to detox. I had like all these supplements that I was taking just for detoxing. And then, sort of with the thought of, before I tackled the Lyme, that I would sort of, build my system up to a healthier place. And I started exercising. And because at one point, I was exercising at the time, I was really healthy when I got my vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
And, at the worst of it, I couldn't even walk to the end of my driveway. I remember I told Ken, I said, I think you're going to have to carry me home, because my muscles, they just couldn't support my body anymore. And, I used to be able to watch my grandkids. And at that point, I couldn't even be alone with my grandkids because I just couldn't take care of them.
Wow.
Barely take care of myself. And so, it is slowly, I think with all the supplements and the vitamins that I take, I got my vitamin D levels back up where they needed to be. I started taking B12 injections. That really helped. Overhauled my diet, like I said, and then really focused on my faith. And it's been, I believe that is one of the reasons why I've gotten my health to where it is. I have some days where I actually forget there's something wrong with me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's
how long would you say it took you, with this rigorous transformation, to see not noticeable change, maybe noticeable change first, but then a noticeable change to the point where maybe you're just like, hey, whoa, like I can't even remember, like, we call it like healing amnesia. We call it chiropractic amnesia. When people get better, they're like, why'd I come in? And maybe that's not going to be the case for you, but oftentimes it's like, wait, I don't even remember that I actually had that today, which is remarkable. What was that kind of timeline for you?
Well, I'm still on that timeline, but I would say probably at year 2. Great. I remember when my 2, everybody, it's so interesting to me. If you ask a vaccine injured person, they can tell you it's like an anniversary date. Like I know when I got my anniversary. I know when I got my vaccine. And so I would say at 2 years, I could look back and say, okay, my hand tremor, gone.
Wow.
My muscle fatigue, gone. My energy level is back. Last summer I could not ride my mountain bike, and a couple of weeks ago I got on my mountain bike for the first time since all of this happened.
Congrats.
And I could have gone longer. I only stayed on it for 30 minutes because I was a little nervous, but yeah, so I feel like there's these things. This summer I'm going to try fly fishing again, because at the time of my injury, we live in this great place in Oregon, and all the outdoor recreation things. It's, one of the benefits of living here. But at the time of I remember after my vaccine that first spring, I remember standing in a river, holding my fishing pole, terrified to move because I realized that I wasn't going to be able to hold myself up any longer. Wow. And I was afraid I was going to fall in and go downstream. Yeah. And so, there's, like I said, that's how I've been able to measure how my health is improved, is by the things that I'm willing to try again that that's I used beautiful. To enjoy. Mm-hmm.
Do you have them laid out, or do you just kind of spontaneously, oh, let's jump on the bike today? Or is it like, you have this like calculated, orchestrated way that you bring everything back
You know
together.
me, I do. And I'll tell you what, I live in a mountain range. Like I can look out my windows and there's a mountain range called, the Cascade Mountains. And there's a mountain called the South Sister. And my goal, I can't do it this summer, but my goal next summer is to be able to climb
That's so awesome.
to the top of South Sister. So yeah, this summer. And then I also started swinging a golf club again. Not very
Beautiful.
good, but so yeah, I have my things
So,
that I want to accomplish.
so there's a phrase in our organization at Future Generations, we call it health potential is your life potential. And you're sharing with me, and most people don't know that until they lose their health, right? Like and you maybe, in some respects, like are a microcosm, not just of the injurious nature of this product, but potentially where virtually everybody is in a different form or fashion. Because whenever I speak around the country, I ask people, are they at the level of health that they wish they were, and I try to charge into the audiences like, if you're not on the path to your best health, then you're leaving yourself vulnerable to potentially what comes next. But that was one of the main themes, I believe, because if you don't have your health, then all these other things that you build on top of your health aren't possible.
Mhm.
And so you were sharing with me your practice, and you're sharing with me like, maybe some of the epiphany type thoughts that you've had around starting your practice. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
Mhm. So I graduated and graduated on time, which was amazing to me. Just
Wow.
because one of the biggest things that I suffered from was incredible brain fog. I mean, I've seen it even here talking to you. I kind of lose track sometimes of where I want to head with my brain. But so it does still plague me occasionally. But I graduated and then decided that I just didn't think that I had the capacity to sit in a therapist chair and to be able to hold space for people who were hurting, and had just sort of resigned myself to the fact that, well, maybe I'll use my degree for something, but I'm probably not going to be able to do this. And I had lunch one day with a guy that I went to school with. We graduate at the same time. We live in the same town. And he asked if I was working. And I said, no, I'm probably not going to work. And so he was the one who sort of put the bug in my ear about, why are you not working? I've worked with you before. I
Right.
know what you're capable of. And so then I started thinking, why am I not working? I got a great education and I love people. I love the space of being able to be in a therapy situation with people, to be able to help them in moments of distress and pain. And why am I not working? Well, I couldn't ever come up with a good enough reason. And then one day it just kind of hit me. For me to not work means that we've talked about they, whoever they, and I'll give it the FDA, the CDC, the government, the media, whoever does not want me to speak up, who they win.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then once I kind of got my head around that, then I just forged forward. It's like, no, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do it afraid, and I'm going to do it with my physical limitations. And I did. So I
So
started my practice 3 months ago.
that's awesome.
Yeah, it is awesome. I love it. And it's funny because I worked with teen girls before, and now I'm working with adults and couples, and yeah.
So it's a private practice,
Mm-hmm.
essentially. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
So before I hear more about your practice,
Mhm.
tell me, you said something unique, and you said it before we hit record, and I wanted to maybe pull on that thread a little bit. What would you say they were attempting to do? Like if they were going to win, if you stopped, right? If they were going to win, if you didn't kind of feel this kind of inspiration and this urge and this purpose to start your practice and start serving, your community in the way that you are now, what was their intentions? What do you believe that they
Well,
were
I mean,
trying to do?
I could go full on conspiracy theory with you.
That's okay. You can go however you want to go, whatever you feel called to communicate, because I would agree with you 1,000%.
Yeah. I mean, when I see, my first window into that there was something weird going on was Instagram. After my vaccine injury, I started following people that I probably would never have followed before, and started seeing, this nefarious, I think you used that word earlier. It's like something just doesn't line up here. This seems so weird to me. And then, my husband, like I said, I mean, he's a researcher and a social scientist. And so, the whole pandemic, he was all about that because, what sociologist doesn't love a pandemic and the psychology that goes behind that, and the how people relate to one another. And so you start piecing these things together and having conversations with other people. And there was such backlash against people that would speak out, and the media dismissing and gaslighting. I think part of it was they just wanted people to go along. You said it, and I've heard my husband say it too. This is the beginning of a lot of things that I think are to come. Social control, and so I think in that place, if you have people that are speaking out, then that creates a problem for somebody who's trying to control a bigger global. Oh my gosh. I mean, you need to have my husband on here.
I will. I was going to kindly invite you to invite him.
Yes, he would. Yeah, he's the one you need to ask. He would love this conversation.
Well, the reason why I say that is because you can't, it's really hard not to go all the way, right? It's really hard not to go that far. But what it actually stops, where you're coming from, is they're attacking the human spirit in a way that thwarts our expression of our fullest potential. And most people might not recognize that, but as a business owner, and having a lot of friends who are business owners, and now having a lot of friends who have a hard time hiring right now, and a lot of friends that have a hard time with their overall just how things were versus how things are. And you see, like, from unemployment stuff to, the way that they're giving out free money, or had been and still are to some degree, it's a philanthropic, nice thing to do to society, but in the end, the psychological impotence that it creates, and it literally starts to degenerate humanity. But here you are. Like, I love in the face of that, you're just like, they win if I don't. And so I am. And I would love to know what your practice is like, and what you see, and how your patients are, and how you have seen, and how you've served them, because I love hearing those stories in the face of so much, right?
Before I actually, let me just segue sort of into that, is through the vaccine injured world, and because we started this website, C19vaxreactions.com, to give the vaccine injured a place to share their story, because what we understood was that to be seen and to be heard was so impacting for people to be able to share, that a lot of healing just comes from being able to be believed, that what happened to you really happened. And so through our, and then my being involved with multiple, I don't even know how many, Facebook groups with the vaccine injured, I was seeing this theme of people that were just desperate desperate to be connected, desperate to be believed. Obviously, desperate to be healed as well.
Of course.
And that has come for some and not for, and not for many, really. And the desperation and the depression that came from that. So I did a support group a couple of months ago before I ever started my practice. I did a support group for a group of vaccine injured. I learned so much from this group of women.
Wow.
And the courage that everybody had to get up every day with a lot of unknowns, and like you said before, you don't really appreciate your health until you don't have your health. And so, and it changes. And so the level of acceptance, that you're not who you used to be can be really difficult.
Wow.
And so I have taken a lot of what I learned from that and have applied it just to my own practice with the just regular people that come in, who honestly, no one who's come into my office has ever said anything about a vaccine injury, or, you'll probably Google my name and I'll probably be surprised at what comes up, probably a lot of vaccine injury things. And still, at the end of the day, I think people, regardless if it's a vaccine injury or whatever, people just want to tell their story, and they want to know that somebody hears them and somebody sees them.
I think I guess I'm speechless. It is literally the intention behind virtually every interview I've done. Even if it's Bobby, even if it's Sherry Tenpenny, even if it's Dell, even if it's, Alex Zach, all these kind of people who've emerged as these influencers, Kevin Jenkins, it's like, it's about actually not keeping them on that pedestal. It's actually just dropping them down into our hearts by just having a normal human interaction that I believe is so radically essential. Like, and for you to come out of this, craziness, absolute craziness that targeted you, that literally targeted you, and literally like you were one of the early patients who were injured to the degree that you were, and to be able to now sit in this in service to the people in your community is remarkable. I think you are doing exactly what the nefarious players out there, pulling all the puppet strings for all the people that are just kind of doing the charade, we're trying to do. They're literally just trying to rob us our humanity. And actually your practice is just to remind people of that. It's like, by the way, I'm going to hold this space for you. I'm going to create this space for you. I'm going to hold this space for you. And you're just going to tell me your story. Like, that's such an amazing thing.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, being able to take your story and take your pain and whatever that is, and then to make new meaning out of that, regardless of what the situation is, really what it means to survive and to, what's the word I want when you, of my brain, see, overcome.
Yeah.
Overcome, whatever hardship you've been exposed to. The vaccine injured, I have seen that time and time again. I'm sure that you're familiar with React 19. There you go. There's a group of vaccine injured who knew that the government was not going to help them, and they took matters into their own hands and started their own research group.
Wow. That's amazing. I can't wait to, I've been wanting to interview them for a while. Tell me a little bit about, if you could future pace this for me. And it isn't the most like flamboyant, it's actually one of the least flamboyant, like just rehumanizing humanity. Like, what does that look like, where we essentially this newfound purpose in life that you have is successful, where people are, where we intentionally create a space for people to be themselves, to tell their story, to be seen, heard, and valued, to hold that space so that it actually potentially elicits, a deeper sense of meaning, and that allows for them to overcome some of the challenges that they have in life. What would you say you see for the world if that were to become, which it is, normal?
Oh my gosh. Could you Yeah, if people stepped into other people's pain to help alleviate suffering, oh my goodness. I think that's, my little world is just very, very small.
Mm-hmm.
My world is very small. I have, like I said, this amazing husband. I've got kids, grandkids, I have friends, and then I have the people that come into my office that I have the privilege of walking through life with. And so, and look what you do. I mean, you have the ability to impact people who come into your office every single day. You do this podcast, you reach out. We all have our giftedness and our talents and the things that we're good at. And if you use those in even super small ways, gosh, wouldn't this place just be a better place?
Be dramatic. It would be, I think it would be so dramatic that people might not recognize it, It's like, this is so normal.
Yeah.
And it's just, I feel at home. I feel like I feel myself, and I feel honored for being myself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's overtly pie in the sky Pollyannish, right? I think it's actually, when people come into that, and I imagine, have you had any feedback from some of I know you're only 3 months in, but have you had some good feedback about the care that you provide?
Yeah, I have. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I frequently ask for feedback.
Yeah.
Because that's how I'm going to get better. And so, yeah, I have. And like I said, I love what I do, and it really truly is a privilege. That's just kind of the best word.
That's awesome.
That I can use. Mm-hmm.
Sheryl, as we close up, what would you say we love to take action as a community and as an audience? What would you say is one thing that you would charge this audience to do as a result of listening to this episode?
I know what I would say. It's very simple. I would say, make your voice heard. Don't be afraid to speak against the bigger narrative and to speak truth to power.
Do you think some people, I feel, have a level of fatigue, and they feel like maybe it's over, and we don't necessarily need to talk about it. And I don't agree with that. But what would you say to those people?
I don't agree with that. No, like I said, I think this was round one. And, when you look at all the stuff coming down the pike with AI and the politics and the liberal wokeism, and it's got so many tentacles into so many different areas of our lives that I think it's really easy for people to kind of hide their head, because it's a really scary thing to look at where we could be. I worry about what this place will look like when my grandkids, are in their 20s and 30s. You probably do too. You have little kids.
I would say that I couldn't agree with you more, because I've been telling people that you might be the only voice. You might be the only exposure that somebody actually has, that they're on this trajectory, right? And their family tree that spans multiple generations is moving in a direction that stays along with the narrative. And you may be the only interaction with them that even gets them off 1 degree, which maybe in a few weeks doesn't really do much, but it plants a seed that in 6 months, 6 years, in 60 years, multiple generations into the future, that something changes in a dramatic way, that for me, I feel a moral obligation as a dad. And this logo right here is a silhouette of my daughter when she was younger. And so our logo has always been her. Every logo that we have has, some form of my family on it. And it's just a reminder that for us, that future generations, that's why we're called future generations, is that we believe that we change the trajectory of family trees, specifically with how they, vibrate with their holistic and natural health. But now it, like you're saying, speaking truth to power oftentimes is the initiator, the catalyst, that force behind what gets them to the end goal, right? Because if we don't, then we inordinately assign our future generations to fight a bigger battle than we ever did. And so you, as grandma, to have told your story in such a way that you were the first domino that fell but stopped, like literally stopped the entire trajectory of virtually every other family member in your family, is remarkable. I don't hear that often. And I think it's a big vote to who you are. I'll fast forward all the way to how you're serving your people in your community today, like literally doing the thing that they have been targeting for so long, the dehumanistic practices that wokeism is, in varying forms, in multiple industries, at varying levels of government and varying levels, like it's completely surrounding us if we let it. And you stand in your power and you continue to tell your story. And I love the fact that this is almost 2 years post, Heart of Freedom 3. And I love the fact that we're 3 months after starting your practice, because when we speak again next, when we see each other again next, I know that there's going to be dozens and dozens of stories of how you've helped transform people's lives just by being human, just by being the person that you are. And I'm so grateful for what you shared. And
well, thank you. You're a huge encourager.
It is literally, everything that you shared is literally, the equation is over and over and over and over in the best possible way, that when something like this happens, all it really takes is someone to rehumanize that person. All it takes is for somebody just to be there with them, listen to them, really, 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 really hear them, see them for who they are, acknowledge them, and then together essentially do something. Your cascade of inspiration, I mean, has captivated and really safeguarded so many people, whether it's, being able to tell your husband and Senator Ron Johnson, to collaborating with John Stockton and looking at all the people that you guys have interviewed at this stage, or they have interviewed at this stage. It's remarkable, because I thought I knew, right? Like I think I know all the people that are out there that are saying the things, and I'm going through the list of people that Ken has interviewed, and I'm like, whoa, the last standing West Point cadet. I'm a West Point grad. I'm going to go reach out to that person, and I'm going to reaffirm in that person that they need and they should continue to stand in their conviction, because who's going to save the planet if
exactly,
right, at this point,
exactly. Right? Well said.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Sheryl. This was so amazing, and I can't wait to see how it just shakes our universe in such a good way. And I know we're just going to have such wonderful feedback. I appreciate you.
Well, thank you. I so appreciate you and everything you do. You're a good man.
We appreciate you joining us for this episode of the Future Generations podcast. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes and Spotify. For more resources based on today's episode, as well as more ways to inspire a brighter future for you and your family, visit us at thefuturegen.com. That's all available exclusively on thefuturegen.com.